I am pleased and honored to introduce our 2016 President of the Las Vegas chapter, Brett Ewing.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you, Bald by Design. That was a great presentation. So tonight, we're honored. We're kicking off this year. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we want to do this year as far as talking about the history of our 60th anniversary. And first of all, I'd like to thank our sponsors for tonight. We have the ETC group, and I think there's a couple of them here. Would you please stand? Thank you for sponsoring tonight. Greg and thank you. And also Caesar's Palace. And by the way, it's our 60th anniversary and it's their 50th anniversary. And it's just absolutely fantastic with the coinciding of that. ETC Group is an energy efficient consulting firm that has assisted Caesars, actually Caesars here, in identifying over $500,000 in energy savings in this very building. They have 4 offices globally and they are experts at reducing energy use in buildings. They're excited to contribute to the city of Las Vegas' sustainable future. And the next thing I'd like to say that we're very honored to have tonight is we have Gary Selesner. He just got off an airplane from Hong Kong, I believe about 2 hours ago, and he said this was a very special thing for him to be able to talk about the history of architecture, especially at Caesar's Palace. We're talking about 50 years. And what's great about Gary, and I'll show this first slide, he wasn't here, but in 1966, this is what it looked like. The axial fountains, Melvin Grossman was the architect, and here we are. Currently, this may not even be the most accurate photograph, but look what's happened in 50 years, and to me the most amazing thing is it's still Caesar's Palace. In this city, it's absolutely fantastic. So I'd like to welcome Gary. He wants to come up and say a few words. I know he has a lot of information to share with you, and he's, by the way, in the last, he'll tell you how many years he's been here, but this transformation of what you see here today and everything that's happened and reinvigorated the brand, Gary's responsible for. Gary?
Well, not really. I've got a lot of help in this transformation, and a couple of you are in this room, and then there's a couple other people in this room who came by to see if I could make it through this speech without falling asleep, and maybe stepping in if I do fall asleep. So in the back is Sean McBurney, who is the general manager of Caesar's Palace. And looking at him, you can see he's my bet to go the next 50 years. And next to him is Corey Johnson, who's relatively new to Caesar's Palace. We found him toiling away in the middle part of the country, one of our Caesar stars out there. So he's now running the $250 million food and beverage business at Caesar's Palace. So say hi to Corey Johnson. And now I guess I know what it feels like to be an architect and get off a plane, fly 12 hours, and have to make a presentation and win a client over. So forgive me. So when I was invited by Brett to welcome you all here to celebrate your 60th year as a chapter and our 50th year at Caesar's Palace, I just didn't want to miss this opportunity to acknowledge the immeasurable contributions that architects and designers and consultants have made to this iconic resort. One of the originals is sitting in the room, Joel Bergman, and we still somehow work every day, every minute with his firm. I'm going to try to get through this quick, but I start thinking about stories. So I had just asked Joel, what was the first major project you worked at Caesar's Palace? Because we're talking about transitions in our industry. And so he told me that he was the architect who was asked to plan this facility you're sitting in here now, which probably many of you know was basically the site where all those famous boxing matches were. So Joel and I looked at each other and we said, we wish he hadn't done that job. Now, this is not to say we don't make a lot of money off this facility, but we all know how important that those sensational events were to the building of the brand of Caesar's Palace. So when a motel owner named Jay Sarno opened Caesar's Palace on August 5th, 1966, his audacious vision was to create an environment where visitors could be treated like guests of a mighty emperor. And toward this end, he oversaw the development of a regal resort hotel environment highlighted by abundant fountains and statues, luxurious suites, distinctive dining, incomparable entertainment, of course, exciting games, and beginning with Evel Knievel's amazing jump, on December 31st, 1967, many world-renowned events were in Sarno's mind. He was the visionary, of course, for what's happened here ever since. So through each decade, and I've been here now 11 years as president. Can't believe how time flies when you're having fun. So fortunate people like me over these decades have been able to work with your counterparts to continually reinvent Caesar's Palace, while challenging ourselves to remain not merely honest to the original theme, but trying to, in everything we do, try to capture Sarno's ethos for this resort. And so somehow, amazingly, today we're designing Caesar's Palace. James Horvath, who does a lot of work for us, is helping us design Caesar's Palace for a third generation of guests. And somehow, against all odds, it still works. And of course, there's still glimpses of Sarno's original vision for an over-the-top casino hotel. For example, standing in front of the graceful fountains out on the Strip, gazing at the still impressive Port Cochere, and also when entering the iconic domed casino, and perhaps most hearkening back to that ethos. When you're in front of Cleopatra's barge, underneath the bow, and her golden torso. But back in the 60s and 70s, Caesar's Palace captured the imagination of visitors who never saw anything like this in their life, and left here and went home and told everybody in their communities about what an incredible place this was. But what happened here was that amazing experience that people would have here, seeing the buildings, and of course with the service and the amazing events and everything, it was successful right from the start, and it funded innovative new attractions, entertainment, other events, which created a demand for more hotel accommodations. So I don't think I know exactly how many rooms were here originally. Joel probably does. Probably 600-700 rooms, something on those orders. But yep. But today there's 4,000 rooms at Caesar's Palace, and Sean and I, if our bosses ask, are going to tell them it's time to build a new tower. And so that was a very virtuous circle of people coming here, being amazed by what they saw, leaving some money, the money allowing us to reinvest in this facility and make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, it enabled us to survive and continue to survive a few bumps along the road that every major property faces from time, and look into the future with a lot of confidence. So, to give you some idea of some of these great things that have happened that were built by your counterparts and your forerunners. So, back in '79, Caesar's Palace opened the Fantasy Suites. Now, I stayed in one of those fantasy suites when I was a young man, and it was a fantasy. I'll tell you that. And just to show you again how it worked, so those fantasy suites were featured in movies which featured Dustin Hoffman, Tom Cruise, George Clooney, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and countless movies. And so here we are, 40 years later, and today we've built the villas at Caesar's Palace, which rival any luxury accommodations in the industry and draw discerning guests from all over the world. And again, back to the fame of this resort, twice inspired the billion-dollar Hangover franchise to center movies in them and build the fame of this resort. The benefits of growth at Caesar's Palace have allowed us to transform, for example, the Centurion Tower into the world's first Nobu hotel, which has recharged our customer base and allowed us to appeal to young people who can afford $300 rooms, and we always kid ourselves about this, $400 pairs of sneakers. The world is changing. Of course, there have been innovative events here, such as Davis Cup tennis, Grand Prix auto racing, and scores of legendary championship fights, as we talked about, which motivated architects to create venues that inspired guests to make very special trips here from all over the world. And that legacy continued in 2006 when this resort celebrated its 40th anniversary. And we thought that our 40th anniversary at Caesars, we needed a motorcycle jump. So I don't know how many of you saw it, but it was all over ESPN. But we had a young man by the name of Mike Metzger who performed a perfect backflip on his motorcycle over the same fountains that Evel Knievel attempted to complete successfully. And fortunately, Mike completed it successfully. And this building and its architecture continues to be featured in movies such as Iron Man. And right now, the movie The Big Short, I don't know how many of you have seen that movie, complicated movie about the crash that we seem to be recovering from now in Las Vegas. But there's some amazing scenes in there set at Caesar's Palace. And because of the unique tax situation that exists in the world of movies, a great portion of those films were actually filmed at Harrah's, New Orleans, and they made it look like Caesar's Palace. But when they needed the money shots, they had to use the architecture of Caesar's Palace. Entertainment. When recalling the days of Frank Sinatra and Sammy James Jr., who camped out, of course, at the Circus Maximus showroom, then came the Coliseum. And from the day it opened, it brought headliner residencies to Las Vegas, first with Celine Dion in the masterful hands of Renee Angelil, and then Elton, but also Cher, Rod Stewart, Mariah Carey, and many other top talents. Food, restaurants. When Caesar's Palace opened, the Bacchanal restaurant made international culinary news with its multi-course Roman feast and wine goddesses. And today, a spectacularly designed gourmet buffet named after the Bacchanal attracts a whole new generation of foodistas who have made it the highest grossing restaurant in Las Vegas and maybe the world. We're going to do $50 million this year in that buffet. In 1992, Caesar's Palace was the first in the gaming industry to have a celebrity chef, Spago, which transformed the dining scene in Las Vegas. And that evolution continues with three-star chefs like Gordon Ramsay and Guy Savoy, Chef Nobu, and now Michael Chow. And in all these restaurants, we've worked with your colleagues, again, to create some of the most beautiful restaurants in the world. And just as the food critics began to rank Las Vegas among the nation's top dining cities, we opened Qua Baths and Spa, expanded the Garden of the Gods to 5 acres with 8 swimming pools, and we work and continue to work very cooperatively with the Simon Property Group to support the unbridled success of the Forum Shops, another rather audacious decision that was made here to put shopping in a casino in Las Vegas, everybody bet it would fail, and look at all the shopping centers now. And simultaneously, we pushed Caesars Palace forward as a major convention destination. And last year, Las Vegas' first mega nightclub, Pure, gave way to Omnia, arguably the best designed and world's most successful nightclub. All of these things, as I said before, help to create incremental revenue from now non-gaming sources, and thus help diversify not only our company's revenue streams, but frankly chart the future of this city's future, which is evolving slowly but surely away from gaming toward non-gaming, toward hospitality, toward a future where these buildings will be, truly destinations, resorts, which happen to have casinos in them. And at every step in this evolution here at Caesars Palace, and of course in our city, we've turned to architects and designers to bring ideas to life and guide us to envision the next phase of lavish resort environments, while continuing to raise our own internal benchmarks for guest service and for hospitality. More than merely a themed resort, we still aspire at Caesars Palace to be the palace where everyone wants to be treated like the guest of an emperor. And we know as long as we remember that goal, we are confident that 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, other presidents will be thanking innovative architects and designers like yourself for your contributions to Caesars Palace and to Las Vegas. So thank you all for listening to this. We're proud to be associated with you. We learn from you every day. And isn't it great to be able to create these magnificent buildings and experiences for the tens of millions, 44 million people who visited this city. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your program.
Thank you, Gary. That was very impressive. I know that he probably could have gone on for about another hour on things that have happened here. But again, thank you again, Gary, for being part of our program tonight. Moving along, tonight we have 4 major sponsors this year for the 60th anniversary. Yesco, and by the way, in May we're going to do one of our meetings at Yesco to talk about the evolution of this sign and what it means to the city. In 1945, Yesco created Las Vegas's first spectacular neon sign. The Boulder Club's new cantilevered vertical and marquee sign with thousands of incandescent bulbs and curtains of neon were unique. For over 70 years, Yesco has created a steady stream of exceptional neon and electronic displays at the Dunes, Sahara, Tropicana, El Morocco, Circus Circus, Caesars Palace, blah, 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 blah. Just about every sign in the city. We're honored, really honored to have Yesco as a 60th anniversary sponsor. Next is JBA Engineers, and ironically, they're celebrating their 50th anniversary also. This is really a marquee year. At JBA Consulting Engineering, they say, we bring buildings to life. In fact, they've been doing it for 50 years. Their roots as trusted advisors trace back to the humble beginnings as a fledgling visionary Ralph Jokel in 1966. Today, they are proud to be recognized around the globe as a gold standard of consulting engineering firms. Their commitment to providing unsurpassed client service with the highest standard of engineering counsel to their clients around the world is the same today as it was in the beginning. We're honored to have JBA as the 60th anniversary sponsor for AIA Las Vegas. Pinta Building Group, I know Ron Lansky's here. Thank you, Ron. Celebrating 15 years. This is a young company, but obviously very talented. Pinta's growth from its Southern Nevada roots into a nationally recognized general contractor is due to its quality work, strong work ethic, and commitment to building trust and relationships. They partner with development, design, and construction teams to provide pre-construction, general contractor, construction manager, and concrete subcontractor services. Penta serves its hospitality, gaming, entertainment, retail, healthcare, education, commercial, industrial, Native American, mining, and public works clients from its 6 offices in Nevada, California, Arizona, and Oklahoma. Thank you, Penta. And MGM Resorts actually stepped in to sponsor us this year, which is fantastic. MGM Resorts International is the leader in entertainment and hospitality, a diverse collection of extraordinary people, distinctive brands, and best-in-class destinations. Working together, they create partnerships and experiences that engage, entertain, and inspire. We're honored to have MGM Resorts International as the 60th anniversary sponsor. Now tonight, I've had a few people say, what are you going to talk about? And I have to tell you, I spent a lot of time thinking about this city and what's happened here, and put a lot of research into this program. And I'm fairly humbled by somebody like Joel Bergman. Oh, he already left. Joel Bergman showing up tonight, Dom Cambiero. There's some great colleagues out there. Steve Richardson, I think, is the first person I ever worked with, sitting right there. So it's absolutely fantastic. So what we're going to do this year, and Randy alluded on it, is take each of the 3 months of what we call a quarter and talk about 15 years. So tonight we're starting quarter 1, 1956 to 1971. Then we'll go into quarter 2, where I spoke about earlier. YESCO will be a key piece of that. Then we'll go into Q3 and Q4, which we move into modern gaming, the Mirage, and ultimately in projects like City Center, and really celebrate the history of the Strip. And a couple people asked me why, and my response to that was, well, look what the Strip has done and what happened here. In 1956, there was 26,000 people in the whole valley. That's unfathomable to me. Today we have 2.2 million. What other city? There's not many cities on the face of the earth that can make those startling metrics. So we're going to start at Caesars, as I said. After I speak, I'm going to walk through some slides here. We have David Schwartz from UNLV Gaming Institute. He's got a piece at the end which is fascinating, and I told him I hope I don't say anything wrong, because this is what he lives and breathes, and he's bringing a whole different spin to what I'm going to talk about in the very beginning. So this is what the Strip looked like in 1956. I think it's interesting, if you can see my pointer. That's Caesar's Palace. It was raw dirt. There's a lot of this raw dirt. 1956. It's an amazing 4.2 miles, as it's been classified, of development when you think about what's happened here. Again, the 26,000 to 2.2 million. And again, there's so much to cover here tonight. We could go on for hours and hours and hours. But during the research, and I want to thank Kelly Hemming, are you here? Have her stand up, please. She put an insurmountable amount of research into this background. Kelly? Thank you, Kelly. And also Randy and Chris Pietria from my office is here. He helped a lot too. So I had to give them credit. So first of all, the Strip was Highway 91. And when this, in 1956, there was no stoplights or stop signs. It was uninterrupted flow in 1956. That's Flamingo Road. So a couple recognizable intersections. Now I'm going to show the red labels for the properties, starting up in the corner there with El Rancho and Hilton. These are all properties that started and were torn down and reinvented, like Frontier Trump, for example, was here. Sansola, Treasure Island sits here. Of course, the Dunes and the Dunes Golf Course, which is Bellagio today. There's, of course, Flamingo Road. The Flamingo is still there. It's one of the few properties that, like Caesar, that still existed. The Sands became Venetian and Palazzo. Desert Inn Golf Course, which is now the Wynn Golf Course. So the Desert Inn became Wynn and Encore. And I don't know if many of you were here to remember the landmark back here by the Convention Center, which is also gone. The blue labels are properties that came in the future. The Mirage, of course, is still there. And then what I call future Caesar's Palace. 10 years later, Caesar's would appear here. Paris, on this side of the Strip, east side. And of course, this vacant piece became MGM's, which turned into Bally's. And this would be Barbary Coast today, which is Cromwell. So they were properties that were erected and built, but transformed and rebranded into something else. Casino Royale, Harrah's, and today the Quad. So we could go on and on about this. One of the things that I always thought as an architect, if you came here, the east side of the Strip, and you can see that today, basically came up and crowded the Strip. Not much pedestrian space. Where the west side properties like Caesar's has the fountains, Mirage has a volcano. They respected it. It was a very interesting thing, even though we didn't have any urban planning here. There was a different foresight from east to west, and that was something I noticed when I first arrived here. So, setting the scene, 1956, as I said, population 26,000, today 2.2 million. Annual tourism in 1956, 8 million. Today, you probably saw in the paper, they're predicting 42.5 million through McCarran with another 20 plus driving. So that number is 63 plus million today. Strip properties at that time, DI, Sands Dunes, New Frontier, Sahara, Hacienda, Stardust, and Trop. I have some slides later to show some of that architecture, some of the early renderings. Most popular song, some of you probably know this, 16 Tons. Biggest movie of the year, Around the World in 80 Days. Headliners on the Strip, Gary had mentioned some of them. Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, Lena Horne. I don't need to read all these, but they were the classics that stepped up entertainment to what we believe in today. I think this is a great statistic. Elvis opened at the New Frontier in April of 1956. He was 21 years old. It was like one of his very, very early concerts. And then this one was a real cool one. The Thunderbirds appeared in 1956. I didn't know those jets were that old, but at least there is a. And one stat I just found out recently is Clark County School District was formed in 1956. There was apparently 14 districts here, and the state of Nevada said, no more, we need to make one district in each county. So that's when that happened. Here's UNLV in 1957. The only thing I could figure out is that must be Maryland Parkway. They had their first graduating classes, I think, in 1963. 1957, air travel started to become the top form of transportation. Interesting statistic is Kurt Kerkorian was a junket pilot. We all know who Kurt Kerkorian is. And the Las Vegas Convention Center opened. Now, that's the round building, which of course is no longer here today. That's the landmark. David Schwartz has something very interesting to say about the convention center in 1956 and when this first was imagined, I think in 1955. Nevada Gaming Commission was created in 1959. Betty Willis designs Welcome to Las Vegas. That's before color, now we have color. And there's a fourth slide there, the way it's been renovated again, but what a classic thing that this city has. And then the Moulin Rouge. In 1960, meetings were held to end the racial discrimination. I think most of you know that before that, somebody like Sammy Davis Jr., when he performed on the Strip, he could not stay on the Strip. He had to go for his lodging off Strip. 1963, the Limited Test Ban Treaty ended the above-ground testing. Howard Hughes arrives in 1966 and camps out in the Desert Inn. Before he gets evicted, he decides to just buy it. That way he won't have to leave. Of course, we all know what Hughes has meant to this valley with Summerlin and all of his other impacts. Gary mentioned that earlier. Evel Knievel crashes over his jump in 1967 over the fountains. First Las Vegas Marathon, 1967. Corporate gaming law, which again, David Schwartz is going to talk to later, 1969. The Beatles performed in that round Las Vegas Convention Center in 1964. Siegfried and Roy opened at the Tropicana, which surprised me. I didn't think they had started that long ago. Of course, everyone knows the Rat Pack performing the first time at the Sands. And then Elvis in 1969 started his long-standing shows at the International. And 71, which is the end of this quarter, the $3.5 million Las Vegas Stadium opened, which is where UNLV plays. The Morelli House, which Hugh Taylor designed, which he recently passed away, is, I think, our March meeting. We're going to talk about mid-century modern. And we all know this, Learning from Las Vegas, which was is a controversial book about what architecture is, and a Yale class came here in the late 60s and studied it. And basically one of the quotes I got out of it is, architects need to be more receptive to tastes and values of the common person rather than designing iconic, egocentric monuments. Which is, isn't that what this city is? It responds to what people want. So I think it was very interesting. I know they just reissued part of it. Also, that brings to the point of the lack of planning on the Las Vegas Strip. Obviously, there was the planning or trying to set boundaries for planning by our jurisdictions, and you have somebody like Steve Wynn or Kirk Kerkorian come in and say, you know what, I'm going to spend $1.5 billion and I need to do what? So if you think about that, again, what other city, what other 4.2 miles on the face of the earth went through these transformations? And I think today, early on, there's some properties and projects that we could also think were suspect, but I think the quality of design, and again, everybody out here has been a part of this in one piece or other. I think it's really stepped up and it's responded where the city gets a whole different view on its architectural values. Gary talked about the movies that filmed here. Of course, the classic 1960 Ocean's 11. I don't think I ever saw The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living and Became Mixed Up Zombies. That came out in '64. Everybody knows Viva Las Vegas, Machine Gun McCain, That's the Way It Is with Elvis, and of course Diamonds Forever, Bond movie. In fact, last night I saw on the news, Strip was closed because Matt Damon is filming one of the Bourne scenes in the next Bourne series. So now I'm going to show a few slides of some architecture we found. Wayne McAllister was what was called a leisure architect, come out of Southern California, did some work at Agua Caliente, did Bob's Big Boy, did some very classic restaurants in Southern Cal. His clients brought him here, and he developed, of course, many of you remember the Round Sands Tower, which is no longer there today. And of course, that was one of the Rat Pack's famous venues where they performed. Dunes, Robert Dorr Jr. was the architect. The classic Dunes, that was, of course, again, replaced by Bellagio. There's a resort shot, and this photo I think is absolutely fantastic. This is 1956. There's a waiter pushing a floating plate of food over to this guy, serving him in the pool. Now, what other city would come up with this idea of how to serve? The waiter's got his pants rolled up. Sahara, which is still there, as we know, been transformed into SLS. Max Meltman, Martin Stern Jr. Architects, which was one of Joel's, first employers, Joel Bergman. I don't think you worked on this, did you, Joel? It's a little before your time. He's not that old. But there's some of the nice drawings I think were great, and the colored rendering. Again, this was in the 50s. This one, you can't really read it, but this is a cover sheet on a set of drawings in 1954, I believe, and they have marketing photos here. The proposed convention pavilion. So they actually put their marketing programming material on the cover sheet. You guys still do that? That was a classic one. Tropicana. That, of course, is where McCarran is today, 1957. And the had a very dramatic porte-cochere. There's their resort pool area. Notice how the landscape was fairly sparse, but as time went, of course, with the operators, they stepped up the offering. And then they had a famous fountain out in front. The Flamingo, of course, is still there, but looks absolutely nothing like this today. Vernon Russell and Hanali were the architects. Again, a low-rise resort. with a lot of landscape, interior pool, courtyard. There's a nice shot of it. And they had an iconic sign. The International. Now, Joel may have worked on this one, 1969. All right, and Joel can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this was the first Y-shaped tower created. The efficiencies of putting an elevator core in the center and getting the 3 legs, I believe this was the first design to accomplish that. There's a rendering of it. I think Joel colored the green stuff here. Here it is under construction, and then there's Mr. Krikorian out on site. Desert Inn, again, Wayne McAllister from Southern California, brought a whole different style of architecture as one of his renderings. It was known as Wilbur Clark's Desert Inn. There's a nice shot of the resort. You can see the amenities have changed, and there's a shot from the strip side. Fremont, I think this one's downtown is a great building, 1958. This introduced some precast concrete panels for sunshade on this tower. So it was, there's some revolutionary things going on with some materials here. And this is the streetscape with the neon. This was the bottom of the soffits and the neon along the strip on Fremont. That's a shot of the casino and one of the bars. And I absolutely love this photo. You talk about minimalist. Here's their room package. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the chapter. Of course, it was set in 1956, and it was managed by the architect members. We didn't have Randy, Levine, or Kelly, so I'm sure they had their work cut out for them. The Young Turks were Robert Field and George Tate, Gerald Moffett, Julio Lucchese, and Ed Hendricks. They published in 1969 a checklist for cities, which was a plan for the development of the property behind the train tracks, which today is known as Symphony Park. Walter Zick was the first president in 1956. This is kind of a cool slide. In 1969, I hosted the Western Mountain Region, which next year we're hosting the Western Mountain Region here in Las Vegas. But around the table, you can see Leo Bournes, George Tate, Robert Field, and Fred Kennedy, Harris Sharp, Fred Perazzo, Gerald Moffett, Gerald Strieglo, Hugh Taylor, and Walter Zick. And I just think it's important to say these names because they really created the base of what's here today. Next month, we have George Tate and Robert Fielden speaking on a round table about, Oh, yes, that's right. Leo Bournes yeah, you just confirmed that. So there's the 3 people from this photograph that are going to sit around and talk about what was happening back then. Alexis McDonald was our one-legged architect. Randy sent me that. Ira Marshak, Moffett and Hendricks, Gerald Moffett and Ed Hendricks. You can see their accomplishments. I'm not going to read all of these, but of course, many of the buildings that are here today and we still enjoy. Wells and Kennedy, David Wells, Fred Kennedy. They became Wells Pugsley and then Pugsley Simpson Coulter. And then this is interesting how we spawn out of the firms and keep growing. George Tate worked for Zick Sharp. Then he opened a firm with Tom Dabrowski, who actually, when I came to town, worked for Dabrowski, Kittrell, Garlock. Then formed Wells Tate Kennedy. That became George Tate Architect. Then Bill Snyder partnered with George Tate and Wyndham Kimsey. I know is here tonight, so it's Tate, Snyder, Kimsey, which is fantastic as these firms have grown over time. Julius Gabriel also designed schools for Clark County, and Dom told me earlier that's where he started his career. 1962, fantastic. Jim McDaniels was a lead designer, also worked for Gabriel and opened his own firm and designed some buildings at UNLV. Found some great photos of what Zick and Sharp was up to. The prototype school, I think we've all seen these schools. I don't know how many are in the valley, but it's still a very popular school and obviously worked well. the community. So that was done in the 50s. And then the Las Vegas Stadium in 1971. They also got into gaming, did some research, which did some very nice properties like the Mint downtown. There's a great piece on this Mint sign where they worked with Yesco. There's actual whole filming series of the design and the testing of it and everything that I think Yesco will probably show when we have our meeting with Yesco. Then, of course, the Stardust. They did the original Stardust. And there's Jack Miller Associates. In 1956, Jack Miller started the firm. Many notable projects: Clark County Detention Center, Life Sciences Building at UNLV, the old Basic High School in Henderson, many convention center additions, housing at Nellis, Sintel, and one of their classics, Nevada Power Company, which is, I guess, Nevada Energy today. The other thing about JMA is it spun off some many firms also. Ed Vance is here tonight. He spent many years there as Ed, as well as Tom Schumann. So again, it was another firm that spawned and grew other companies. Now, I want to introduce David Schwartz, who's the director for gaming research at UNLV. Since 2001, he maintains the Gaming Studies portal. He's also a gaming hospitality editor for Vegas 7, and his column is the Greenfeld Journal. Trippies Las Vegas named him 2014 Person of the Year on his contributions to the study of gambling in Las Vegas. And he's authored many books. And as I said before, he's a great compliment. He'll tell you some things that I didn't talk about and didn't even know about. So, David?
Okay, thank you very much. How's everybody doing out there? All right, awesome. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you pretty quickly about the 5 big trends that shaped the gaming industry in the Strip in that momentous 15 years from 56 to 71. And here they are. Number 1 is the turn to convention travel, which really impacted the shape of Strip architecture. Jay Sarno and theming. This is going to be, I think, our triple dip of Jay Sarno, which I think he would have appreciated. Weeding the green felt jungle, getting rid of the mob, if I'm allowed to talk about that. Howard Hughes, and the corporate transition. So these are all, when I look back at it, I said, these are the 5 biggest things that happened in this period. So first, let's talk about conventions. Now, in 1955, there was the biggest percentage increase in Strip hotel capacity in history. They added about 6 new resorts across town, and they did awful. Most of the new places went bankrupt. Dunes went bankrupt. The Sands took them over for a while. A lot of them went bankrupt. And people got scared. And for years, people in Las Vegas had been trying to get a convention center. And they said, well, you know what we need to do? If we want to really get the big crowds of people to come to Las Vegas, we need a convention center at the capacity for 7,500 or even 10,000 people. So we are a major, major player there. They were afraid that they'd overbuild. So they pushed for that. Now, a couple new casinos opened up. You had the Hacienda, which was way far to the south. They were one of the people that Brett talked about that pioneered in the junket airlines. You had the Tropicana, which was the Tiffany of the Strip, and the Stardust, which was the first mass market casino. It had about 800 rooms when it opened. Then it absorbed the Royal Nevada and had 1,000 rooms. And it was just basically, it's not fancy. There's a lot of rooms. Let's fill it up. So in 1955 and 1956, there's a lot of debate, a lot of wheeling and dealing. And you had the motel owners pitted against the hotel owners, and they could not agree on a fiscal structure for the convention center. That 55 bust scares them all. Hotel owners, motel owners, kiss and make up. They pass a bond issue, and they figure out how to finance it through room taxes, and they open the convention center. And the result is that they have higher midweek occupancy in all the hotels. Back in 55, the average Strip hotel had about 200 or 300 rooms. And it was really easy for them to fill those rooms in the weekend. Basically, just open the doors. But what happens during the week? Conventions let them fill during the week, which now means you have bigger hotels. Stardust with 800 rooms. Caesar's Palace here opened up with 680 rooms, high-rise and low-rise. After this, Kirk Kerkorian and Martin Stern Jr. create the integrated mega resort, and the International, which we see there on top, was the first. Second was the original MGM Grand, now Bally's. International has 1,500 rooms. MGM Grand opens with 2,100. As this is happening, casinos like the Flamingo, Trop, and Riv also expand. So the city is starting to getting bigger as the convention is driving that. All right. Second big thing I want to talk about, very obvious here, is Jay Sarno and theming. We see a little bit of Jay. Do I have those? Yeah. So there's Jay, the family man, a little bit of the architecture, and a little bit of the theming. And you might notice something. The graphic artist who was trying to get the contract was not an idiot. And Jay said, I want you to create a mascot for the hotel. And that graphic designer turned around and basically created Jay Sarno as the mascot, which he loved. And they had a gorgeous blonde feeding him grapes, which he loved, because he did like the women quite a bit. So here's the thing about Jay. He comes to Las Vegas in a junket with the Flamingo in 1963. It was the first weekend that Robert Goulet was in town at the Flamingo, and he was a pathological gambler, loved to eat, loved women. You would have thought, well, Jay is in paradise here. But he hated it. He absolutely hated Las Vegas. He thought it was boring, he thought it was bland, and he said, I can do better. So he develops the idea of Caesar's Palace. And his unique contribution to the Strip in Las Vegas was the idea of the theme that put all the focus on the guest. And we've seen before the fountains here. And the idea that Jay had about the fountains, he also was the first person to look at Las Vegas as a place of architectural drama. His idea was that you are driving down the road, driving from the Strip, past these fountains. And as you're doing it, you're traveling in time and space. And when you pull up to the porte cochere here, and a bellman in a toga greets you, you have now been transported to a palace where you are the Caesar. And it was pretty sexist back then. Later they would also make it Cleopatra. But you are the Caesar, or the Cleopatra, and everything caters to you, and you alone. Everything is here to fulfill your fantasy. And this, again, is Jay's idea of what men would want in Las Vegas. We've got Nat Hart, who was the executive chef behind the Bacchanal there. This is the original Bacchanal room. But he's surrounded by beautiful women, he's got food, and he is happy. And there's Jay. So it was really this overarching theme. And you notice that even Nat Hart, the executive chef, is wearing a kind of toga-inspired uniform. This guy does not look happy at all to be wearing the uniform, and there are the goddesses. And his idea was, we're not going to have waitresses, we're going to have goddesses, and they'll massage your temples and peel grapes for you. And it worked. People loved it. It became the most successful casino in the world. All right, so that's Jay and what he brought. And he also did Circus Circus, which was another big contribution, which eventually became the leading low-end casino, and for many years was the most profitable casino. So how about the mob? We've heard a lot about the mob. What happened with them? Well, in the early 60s, there were a lot of concerns about organized crime. Bobby Kennedy wanted to get Las Vegas. He wanted to get the mob, get Jimmy Hoffa. $10 million of the 19 to build Caesars, by the way, came from Jimmy Hoffa. And Bobby Kennedy didn't like that. So they said, we need to change things. One of the things they did was they inaugurated the Black Book, or the List of Excluded Persons. You also had these muckraking books like The Greenfelt Jungle that talked about what a terrible place Las Vegas was. And it's funny because these books came out and said Las Vegas is such an awful place and the mobsters are running it. And guess what that did to visitation? It skyrocketed it. But there was a lot of changes. For one, the generation of guys who had started out in organized business in the Prohibition days back in the 20s and 30s were getting older and they were retiring. And the new generation was coming in, and they did not have that experience, so they were going away. You also had a big emphasis from law enforcement at the federal and the state level in cracking down this. So by the 1980s, the mob is totally pushed out from the ownership of casinos, which is a very big change, which again is going to affect the architecture. These guys, Meyer Lansky, Bugsy Siegel, built casinos with what the great Las Vegas historian Hal Rothman called shoebox capital, which is about what it sounds like. You've got these guys who are skimming money off of various things, and they're keeping money in their shoeboxes, and they're funneling it to Vegas and skimming money back. And you can get about so far. So the Sands cost about $5 million to build when it opened in '52. The Caesar's Palace cost $19 million. So you're really straining the edges of that. International cost $50 million, which you cannot get out of shoeboxes. So the advent of corporate financing, and if you're curious, if I have another little nerdy fact here, the first mainstream lender loan to a Vegas casino was here at Caesar's Palace. It was Aetna Insurance, loaned Caesar's Palace the money in the late 70s to build that fantasy tower that Mr. Selesner talked about. So we come full circle. Okay. Next is Howard Hughes. People love to talk about Howard Hughes because it's kind of a crazy story. So Hughes always liked Las Vegas. From the 40s, he was coming here. He bought a huge tract of land called Hughes Site. I love the way that's spelled, in the 50s. So if he hadn't moved here, we still would have had Summerlin because that's what it eventually became. In the 60s, he got kind of funny, as you can see from this picture here. It's an artist's rendering of what he might have looked like. But he became a little eccentric, and he decided he didn't want to be bothered by people serving subpoenas or the general public. So, of course, seeking solitude, he moved to the 9th floor of the Desert Inn. What better place to get away from it all? And as Brett said, he didn't want to get evicted. He moved in after Thanksgiving in the slow period. As they're getting towards New Year's, they're getting antsy. They want high rollers in there. And he bought the place in March of '67, stayed in town for 4 years, also bought the Sands, Frontier, Castaway, Silver Slipper, and Landmark, and then he leaves town in 1970. All right, so that's Hughes. Now here's a very interesting thing, the corporate transition. Here is a Caesars World Incorporated stock certificate. Here's a cool thing. So originally, the Nevada law said you had to investigate every owner of a casino, no matter how small. So you could not have publicly traded corporations owning casinos. In '67 and '69, they amended the laws to allow that. And a couple of companies come in. Del Webb had already been in Las Vegas and through a shell company had owned the Mint and the Sahara. They invest bigger, and they eventually build around the state. Hilton comes in and buys the International from Kirk Kerkorian and the Flamingo from Kirk Kerkorian. Lum's had been a hot dog and beer chain who they spun off. They had so many different businesses. They had an Army-Navy store. They had a chain of restaurants called Steak Thing, which I just think is a concept that should come back. So if any of the Caesars folks are in the back there, Steak Thing, bring it back. And the thing about casinos is that Caesar's Palace was so successful that Lum's bought Caesar's Palace. In a couple years, they sell off Steak Thing and Lumburgers and all that stuff, and they rename themselves Caesar's World. You also have Ramada, which bought the Tropicana, and Holiday Inn, which became Harrah's. So Bill Harrah's, original Harrah's, and Showboat are two existing companies that go public. They do IPOs, and this helps them build a lot more stuff, which is good for everybody in this room, isn't it? So the big changes we've seen are changes of scale. You can see it just got so much bigger, so much more lavish, and it set the stage for the future. Now, but while I have you, I want to make a pitch for the history of Las Vegas and the architectural history of Las Vegas. And the Center for Gaming Research is in UNLV Special Collections, which has an excellent collection of architectural materials. We have the drawings and renderings from Homer Rissman, Martin Stern Jr., Gary Guy Wilson, and a lot of other folks, but there's a lot of people we don't have anything from. And we're in the middle of a really neat collecting initiative and exhibit that's going to document mid-century modern Las Vegas. So if you know of any sources, any old files, papers that would help us document mid-century modern Las Vegas on the Strip and off the Strip, vernacular architecture off the Strip, everything, I would love, love, love to talk to you, because this is going to be a really cool thing. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, David. That was amazing. Like I said, he has so many statistics that are remarkable. You know, I didn't say in the beginning, one of the reasons we thought that we'll go down this path about talking about the Strip, because I personally believe, having worked in Q3 and Q4 on the Strip, that every time something happened on the Strip, when 1987, when Steve Wynn said, I want to make this amazing resort on the Strip that's a mirage, and I want a volcano, an erupting volcano and waterfalls. When those things happened, the city swelled. Things happened. The Mirage, properties like the Mirage, Bellagio employs 10,000 people as a workforce. But in front of that, design and construction, think about it. All these people with all these talents from all over the world all of a sudden started coming to Las Vegas. Look at all the Cirque performers. We have, I don't know how many, I know there was up to 7 Cirque shows. Those are world-class athletes. They're Olympic people. So all these people come to Las Vegas. So what happens? They need community. They need the churches. They need the shopping. They need the libraries. So I personally think that the Strip caused so many things to happen in this city and grew it, which all of you people, again, all of you architects and designers in this room were a big part of delivering what's here today. So that's part of what we're doing here, and we're going to hit each quarter and talk a little bit about what happened. In Q3, Jim Marin's going to come in at the beginning, going into Q4. He loves art and architecture. He's going to talk about City Center and talk about modern gaming. So are there any questions that I might answer, or for David Schwartz that anybody has? This is such a wide breadth of information. I think we could talk for days about it, but is there anything anyone has? Any comments?
The only thing I would say, Dave, that you didn't say Caesars. And anybody that doesn't know Caesar's Palace, anytime they spell it, they always put the apostrophe. Yes.
Right.
Is it? And that was because there's not one Caesar. Everybody is a Caesar. And that's,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. That was an important thought. It's a subtle but important.
Yeah, again, that's one unique thing about that brand. That's right. Anybody else? Well, next month we have The Way We Were, a roundtable discussion that'll be at the Fifth Street School. And again, we're going to have George Tate, Robert Fielden, Gary Guy Wilson, who's been a board member recently, Leo Borns, and it will start February 17th at 5:30 at the school. And David Wells. And with that, thank you, and thank you for attending tonight. Have a good evening.